Bye, Frank.
Hey, come on, I'm responsible for that.
Back in the 1970s, you couldn't get bigger than MASH. It was more than a show. It was a cultural phenomenon, a ratings giant that found a way to talk about the grim absurdity of war with both profound humanity and razor-sharp wit. And for 5 seasons, at the very center of the chaos, was actor Larry Linville, playing the unforgettable, pompous, and pathetic Major Frank Burns. He had it all: fame, a great paycheck, and a key role on a historic show. He was the guy everyone loved to hate. So why on earth did he walk away at the absolute height of his success? The answer isn't what you think. It's not about money or backstage drama or chasing a bigger spotlight. It's a story about artistic integrity, a character who was painted into a corner, and the gut-wrenching choice a talented actor had to make to save his own creative spirit. This is the true story of why Larry Linville quit MASH to really get. Why Larry Linville's decision was such a big deal. You have to understand the mountain he was choosing to walk away from. In the early 70s, TV was mostly predictable sitcoms and by-the-book dramas. And then came MASH. Trying to turn Robert Altman's cynical and bloody 1970 film into a primetime sitcom was a huge gamble. The movie was a counterculture masterpiece, and the idea of translating its chaotic, anti-authority vibe to the small screen, complete with a laugh track, seemed like a recipe for disaster. But the show's creators, Larry Gelbart and Gene Reynolds, had a different idea. They saw a chance to create a new kind of television, one that could make you laugh out loud one minute and break your heart the next. They wanted to honor the comedy in the show's description without ever forgetting the war. It was a delicate, tightrope act. The network, CBS, demanded a laugh track, a decision Gelbart and Reynolds hated. In a now famous compromise, they got the network to agree to keep the laughter out of the operating room scenes. That small win signaled the show's real purpose: to use comedy as a shield against the daily horror faced by the doctors and nurses of the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. When MASH premiered in September 1972, it was no instant hit. Stuck in a tough Sunday night slot, it nearly got cancelled. But CBS saw its potential and made a game-changing move, shifting it to Saturday nights between the ratings titans, All in the Family and The Mary Tyler Moore Show. The show didn't just find an audience, it found a nation. It shot into the top 10 and stayed there for the rest of its run. MASH hit so hard because it was about more than the Korean War. It was about the human cost of any war. Airing during the final painful years of Vietnam, the series gave America a way to process its own complicated feelings about conflict and patriotism. It could be outrageously funny with Hawkeye and Trapper John's gin-soaked antics, but it could also be devastatingly serious. It explored the psychological toll of war, the moral compromises, and the profound sense of loss. It was one of TV's first true dramedies, proving that an audience could handle complex tones and that a 30-minute sitcom could carry the weight of real-world tragedy. This was the institution Larry Linville was a part of. Not just a hit show, but a cultural landmark. Before he was ever known as Ferret Face, Lawrence Lavon Linville was a classically trained actor with a serious resume. Born in California, he actually started out studying aeronautical engineering. But the stage was his true calling. He applied for and won a scholarship to the prestigious Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London, a rare honor for an American actor at the time. This wasn't the background of a guy destined to play a bumbling fool. This was the training of a dedicated thespian. After returning to the U.S., he built a solid career as a guest star on shows like Bonanza and Mission Impossible, and even had a recurring role as a police lieutenant on the detective series Mannix. He was a respected working actor. When casting for MASH began, the creators needed their antagonist. They needed someone to embody everything Hawkeye and Trapper John fought against: hypocrisy, blind rule-following, and jingoism that ignored human suffering. They needed Major Frank Burns. Larry Linville signed a 5-year contract, and stepped into the role that would define his life. In the early seasons, Frank Burns was a masterpiece of arrogant incompetence. He was a lousy surgeon whose blunders often needed fixing by the very doctors he despised. He was a self-righteous moralist carrying on a ridiculous affair with Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan, played by Loretta Swit. Their secret romance was a comedy goldmine, leading to endless pranks and humiliation. Frank was whiny, paranoid, and had zero self-awareness. Linville played this insufferable man with pure genius. He made Frank not just hateful, but hilariously pathetic. There was a desperation to Frank, a deep insecurity that fueled all his bluster. Linville himself perfectly understood the character's purpose. In one interview, he said Frank represented the psychosis of war itself, mindless, random, hostile one moment, silly the next. The character was a smash hit with audiences, the perfect foil for Alan Alda's rebellious Hawkeye. Linville's performance was so convincing, he reportedly got hate mail from viewers who couldn't tell the actor from the character. For 5 years, he was a vital part of a TV juggernaut, which made his decision not to renew his contract all the more shocking. The problem for Larry Linville started when MASH began to evolve. Around the 3rd and 4th seasons, the show deepened, shifting from a sitcom in a war zone to a drama that used comedy for relief. The departure of key creators, Larry Gelbart and Gene Reynolds, sped up this change, and Alan Alda took on a bigger creative role. This new era gave us some of the show's most powerful moments, like the shocking death of Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake at the end of Season 3. It was a stark reminder that in war, not everyone gets to go home. When Wayne Rogers' trapper John left, he was replaced by Mike Farrell's B.J. Honeycutt, a family man whose presence brought a more mature, often sadder energy to the swamp. Loretta Swit's Margaret Houlihan also began to evolve, growing beyond the hot lips caricature into a stronger, more complex woman who finally got tired of her affair with the married Frank. Every major character was growing and changing. Everyone, that is, except Frank Burns. While the 4077th deepened around him, Frank was stuck in a cartoonish loop. His storylines were always the same: his surgical incompetence, his tattling, his greedy schemes, and his pathetic pining for Margaret. The pranks continued, but as the show grew more serious, picking on a character who seemed to be genuinely losing his grip just wasn't as funny anymore. Frank went from comic foil to a sad one-note punching bag. For a classically trained actor, like Larry Linville, this was creative torture. He had signed on to play an antagonist, but he had become a caricature. His castmates were getting scripts with Emmy-winning dramatic scenes, while Linville felt he was just repeating the same old beats. He had taken the character as far as he could. Series creator Larry Gelbart even expressed regret, calling the lack of dimension in Frank's character lazy writing. The frustration grew. During his last season, it's said that Linville became so tired of Frank being the butt of every joke that he stopped watching the daily footage. This wasn't a diva move. It was the quiet protest of a trapped artist. When his 5-year contract was up in 1977, the producers offered him a new 2-year deal. On one hand, he had security, fame, and a cast he genuinely liked. On the other was his artistic soul, begging for a new challenge. In the end, the choice was clear, if not easy. Larry Linville chose to walk away. Larry Linville's decision to leave MASH was his and his alone. He wasn't fired or pushed out. In fact, away from the camera, Linville was the total opposite of Frank Burns. He was a well-liked and respected member of the cast. Alan Alda called him one of the nicest people he'd ever worked with, and Gary Berghoff, Radar, called him a renaissance man. His departure was a matter of professional principle, not personal problems. The writers wanted to give Frank a proper send-off. According to writer Ken Levine, they offered Linville a hefty sum to return for a farewell episode in the Season 6 premiere. However, Linville declined. It's been widely reported that he was going through a difficult divorce at the time, and was concerned a large paycheck would become part of the settlement. As a result, Frank Burns vanished from the 477th entirely off-screen. At the start of Season 6, in the episode Fade Out, Fade In, the camp learns Frank's fate through phone calls. After Margaret's marriage, Frank had a complete mental breakdown in Seoul, mistook a general's wife for Margaret, and was arrested. He was sent for a psych evaluation, but in a perfect, absurd twist, his paranoid rants were mistaken for passionate anti-communism. So instead of a court-martial, he got promoted to lieutenant colonel and transferred to a veterans hospital back home in Indiana. The camp, of course, threw a party. Frank Burns was gone. The exit was abrupt, almost an afterthought, which was strangely fitting for a character who had become irrelevant to the show's heart. The 477th, and the series itself, was ready to move on. Frank Burns's departure didn't leave a hole, it created an opportunity. The producers knew they couldn't just replace Frank with a similar character. That would repeat the same problem. They needed a new kind of antagonist, and what they came up with was one of the best character introductions in TV history. Major Charles Emerson Winchester III, played with magnificent arrogance by David Ogden. Steers, Winchester was the polar opposite of Frank Burns. Where Frank was an incompetent surgeon, Charles was a brilliant, Harvard-educated doctor who was arguably better than Hawkeye. Where Frank was a buffoon, Charles was a man of culture who loved classical music and fine literature. He wasn't a villain to be laughed at. He was a formidable adversary. Winchester's arrival changed the show's entire dynamic. The conflict was no longer about good doctors versus a bad one. It was a clash of ideas. Hawkeye's humanism went up against Winchester's elitism. The jokes got smarter, the debates more intellectual, and the drama more profound. Winchester wasn't just a foil. He was a mirror, capable of both incredible selfishness and surprising moments of compassion. In many ways, Larry Linville's departure was the catalyst that allowed MASH to complete its evolution from a great sitcom into a legendary piece of television. For Larry Linville, the road after MASH was more complicated. He worked steadily, appearing in a long list of popular shows like The Love Boat, Fantasy Island, and Murder, She Wrote. He also had roles in short-lived sitcoms, but he could never fully escape Frank's shadow. The man who left MASH to avoid being a one-note character often found himself offered variations of that same note. In later years, Linville admitted to some regret about his decision, suggesting that while he was proud of his choice, it might have been a poor career move financially. He seemed to miss the security and the family he'd been a part of. It was a poignant reflection on a life-defining choice. He had stayed true to his artistic conscience, but it didn't lead to the diverse roles he might have hoped for. What do you think? Was Larry Linville right to choose his artistic integrity over a secure role on a hit show? And who was the better? Character MASH legacy, the comically inept Frank Burns or the brilliantly arrogant Charles Winchester? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy deep dives into classic TV, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more. The story of Larry Linville's exit from MASH is more than just TV trivia. It's a powerful story about a deeply personal and difficult choice. Linville was a talented, serious actor who played a character that became a cultural icon. And yet, he walked away from it all because he felt creatively bankrupt. His decision turned out to be a pivotal moment for MASH. The departure of the one-dimensional Frank Burns made room for Charles Emerson Winchester III, a complex adversary, who helped elevate the show to new dramatic heights. In a way, Linville's sacrifice allowed the show he loved to achieve its full potential and become a true masterpiece. Linville himself may have remained, for many, forever Frank Burns. But his story is a powerful testament to an artist's integrity. It's a reminder that for some performers, creative growth is worth more than even the biggest success. Larry Linville chose to save his creative soul, and in doing so, he left behind a twofold legacy: 5 seasons of perfect comedic timing and a departure that allowed a television classic to become legendary.